Most people living in the Nordics never realize that this seasonal ritual is not only about lamps and blankets. It is a philosophy practiced with mittens on. The mood of offices begins to change. Meetings tighten, expectations soften around the edges, and calendars sprout color-coded blocks for focus and for family. The nation hums with the ethics of moderation and mutual respect, the silent covenant of Lagom, which holds that a life should be balanced, reasonable, and sustainable across months of darkness. Yet beneath the civility, something restless churns. There is perfectionism quiet as snowfall, social pressure tidy as a snow-cleared pavement, and a digital overwhelm that does not acknowledge the sun's departure. Slack pings and email banners ignore latitude. Blue light floods the face at 7 a.m. and again at 11 p.m., and the nervous system forgets what season it is. In the modern Swedish workplace, an archetype steps forward each autumn: the conscientious builder. This figure is steady, reliable, cooperative, an ideal colleague in a culture that prizes consensus. But as daylight thins, the builder can begin to carry an invisible load, the expectation to deliver without drama, to be thoughtful yet efficient, collaborative yet self-sufficient, ambitious yet properly modest under gentle Lagan's gaze. The coffee is strong, the to-do list is stronger. The builder nods in meetings, meets deadlines, and bikes home through drizzle to the rituals of Fredagsmys, and still feels a whisper of insufficiency, an intuition that work has spread like ink beyond the borders of the page. You know this whisper. It visits at the laptop's glow when the body wants candlelight. It arrives as a pucker of anxiety on the tram, a doubt about whether the path is chosen or merely convenient. The city's quiet discipline becomes your own, and still, there is the thrum of the nervous system asking for a different contract with time. Lagom promises equilibrium, yet the algorithm of modern life is optimized for excess. More notifications, more comparison, more invisible labor in the mind. Lagom narrows the day while the world widens your sense of obligation. Between those pressures, spirit becomes thin ice. Here is where an older voice can be heard, older even than the wooden red cottages and the deep forests of Småland. It is the voice of the Stoic porch, of people who learned to practice serenity in empires and marketplaces, soldiers' camps and philosophers' studies. Their counsel was forged for crowded days and long nights. Their anthem was not to flee the world, but to engage it with inner steadiness, like a skier gliding through a wind-blown trail, trusting legs more than weather. Stoicism is not a hard winter. It is a hearth of discipline within. Sweden's Mörktid does not need another layer of bracing. It needs a way to warm what is within and right-size what is without. The conscientious builder can become the tranquil artisan. The change is not dramatic. It is Lagom in spirit, incremental, respectful, practical. Think of a workshop in Ostermalm where lamps are placed exactly where they reduce eye strain, where tools are arranged for efficiency, where the door is closed when focus is required and opened when collaboration matters. Stoicism at work does the same with attention, emotion, and effort. It arranges the inner workshop to match the season, not the season to match desire. It decides what belongs to the craftsperson and what belongs to the wind. As the leaves bronze and the archipelago becomes a string of dark beads on leaden water, a truth sharpens. Daylight can no longer be treated as an afterthought, nor can energy. You can sense it in the way Swedes turn their faces toward any shard of sun at lunch, and the way offices with skylights become sanctuaries. The body is a clock tuned to latitude. The mind needs a philosophy that respects that clock while defending the soul from the economy of distraction. This is where Lagom meets the Stoic core, an art of measure, a refusal to be owned by external storms, a patient bravery that says enough is not poverty, enough is mastery. So the question becomes practical and immediate, the kind one carries on the commuter train. How does a person living under a receding sun work with both dignity and calm? How does one keep ambition from curdling into anxiety, collegiality from dissolving into performative agreement, efficiency from overrunning the rituals that make a human being more than a calendar? The answer begins with a principle so simple it can be written on a sticky note and placed beside the desk lamp. A principle that the season itself seems to whisper through fogged breath. There are things you can govern, and there are things you cannot. And wisdom is the art of dividing the day along that invisible line. At a desk beside a basil plant and a sad lamp, a paperback of meditations sits dog-eared beside the reusable coffee cup. The conscientious builder turns a page as dawn seeps only reluctantly over Vasastans rooftops. Ancient sentences meet Nordic morning. Power lies not in weather, nor in status, nor in the moods of colleagues, but in the judgments one allows to form, the choices one repeats until they become temperament. Epictetus would have understood this city's choreography of calm. He spoke to artisans and administrators, to people who had tasks and constraints, whose workday pressed in like winter sky and demanded an interior clarity that could not be outsourced. The dichotomy of control arrives here not as a theory, but as a compass. What belongs to a person? Attention, intention, effort, response. What does not? The length of daylight, the ping rate of messages, the sudden gusts of office politics, the algorithms that toss comparison onto the phone at midnight. Modern Sweden presents a handsome test of this compass. The culture is designed to protect equilibrium. Fika punctuates the day, vacation is defended fiercely, parental leave is a social covenant, and the word lagom floats like a lantern guiding the pace. Yet the digital tide ignores all covenants. The open office dilutes attention. The calendar is colonized by polite meetings that multiply like snowflakes. The ethics of consensus can blur decisions until focus dissolves. Social media glints with tastefully minimal lives. Perfectionism shows up in neutral tones. The conscientious builder becomes a curator of occurrences, careful never to claim too much or too little, wary of stepping outside the lane that Gentlelogan quietly paints. In such an environment, the heart needs a discipline stronger than politeness. Marcus Aurelius wrote at daybreak and after-night campaigns, practicing a routine that a Swede on a November bus would recognize. Acknowledge what can wound. Remind the mind it can remain unharmed. Begin. He insisted that the line of one's character be drawn straight, regardless of the crookedness around it. The Nordic world knows lines drawn straight. Plowed bike lanes, meeting agendas, the sequence from Fika to stand-up to deep work to school pickup. But even straight lines are fragile in Mörktid, when the body's chemistry leans toward melancholy and the eye searches for light. The Stoic counsel does not argue with biology. It honors it and builds a scaffolding for spirit. The dichotomy of control becomes a winter craft. One portion of the day is carved like wood that belongs to the artisan. Another portion is treated like weather one layers against but does not command. Seneca's letters read like a conversation across the horizon, asking what becomes of time when attention is squandered. He warned of living as if life were endless and days were loose change. In an autumn office, that warning is practical. Each notification taxes the nervous system. Each polite yes builds toward a silent no directed at health, family, craft. The Nordic challenge is not a lack of systems, it is the excess of them. Abstract sleep, lamps simulate dawn, watches measure stress, and yet the inner permission to be finite, to be lagom with ambition and generous with boundaries, remains elusive. The old Roman reminds a modern worker that time is not managed, it is honored or neglected. Epictetus would smile at Swedish pragmatism. He liked exercises that fit into ordinary hours. Close the metaphorical door when the work begins, he would say. Choose responses as if they were chisels. A person who practices this refuses to let the wind of opinion blow the workshop's tools out of reach. The open office and remote thread can still fray focus, but the artisan remembers which threads are held by one's own hand. That hand sets the phone aside during the hour that matters. That hand chooses to accept a train delay without internal catastrophe. That hand pauses before replying to the email that arrived at 22:37, letting dignity set the tempo. You can feel how this reorders the day. It grants permission to design routines around the latitude rather than against it. It invites a candle at lunch and a brisk walk at 14 when the sky is already dimming. It suggests that the team's weekly ritual include not only status updates, but the naming of what lies outside collective control. Market swings, policy shifts, viruses, storms. By naming them, a group stops pretending omnipotence and begins practicing sovereignty where it is real. Your own calendar becomes a map with two colors, one for the realm of influence, one for the realm of acceptance. The map does not remove obstacles. It prevents heartbreak that comes from confusing the road with the horizon. The modern Nordic challenge is subtle. It is not dramatic stress, but elegant depletion. Not chaos, but the slow erosion of presence by well-designed tools and kindly expectations. Stoicism enters not as armor, but as calibration. The conscientious builder learns, like sailors in the archipelago, to read wind and rock, to trim sail rather than curse weather. Marcus whispers to the calendar. Seneca speaks to the inbox. Epictetus looks at the posture of the back in the chair. The dichotomy of control sets the keel. Many other planks will be needed. Memento mori to clarify priorities, negative visualization to soften fear, practices to warm attention when the day darkens early. But the keel comes first, invisible and decisive beneath the waterline of behavior. You stand at the office window, watching the rain stitch Sodermern to the sky, and sense the season tightening its knot. The philosophy on the desk is older than the bricks across the street, yet it feels engineered for the next notification. The work ahead is not to escape the world, but to learn its weather and keep the inner workshop bright. That is a craft worthy of Mörktid. A deeper architecture comes into view when the tranquil artisan lays out the day like a carpenter's bench. The dichotomy of control is the bench itself, steady, simple, uncompromising. On it rest two more instruments of winter craft. The first is memento mori, not as morbid flourish, but as clarifying light. The kind Swedes chase at lunch on a brief January sun. The second is negative visualization, a rehearsal of adversity that builds emotional muscle the way ski tracks carve strength into snow. Taken together, these tools shape a psychology designed for high-latitude work, disciplined attention, proportionate emotion, and a pace that respects both ambition and biology. Memento mori enters the Nordic office without fanfare, a quiet reminder that a life is finite and that days are not renewable. In a culture that defends balance, this thought has surprising power. It rescues focus from polite diffusion. The conscientious builder sees a meeting invite arrive for a purpose that could be served by a paragraph. The reminder of mortality shifts the response from reflexive yes to crafted contribution. Seneca would approve of this editing of life. In Mörktid, when the sun itself edits the day, the mind learns to prize what is living over what is merely busy. One senses how time thins like light, and that awareness gives courage to speak plainly, to ask, what outcome matters, and then to cut toward it with kindness. Negative visualization pairs with this like a wool layer beneath a coat. Picture the tram delayed, the server down, a colleague disagreeing, the child with a fever on the morning of a crucial brief. Envision the absence of what is taken for granted, the warm apartment, the functioning body, the steady income. The exercise does not breed anxiety. It metabolizes it. It lowers the pulse by teaching the nervous system the shape of storms before they arrive. Epictetus recommended such rehearsals because they return the mind to its sphere of control. Response, not circumstance. In Sweden's long night, this is practical medicine. When daylight surprises like a rare guest, gratitude is not performative. It becomes a physiological event, a warmth that lifts behavior. Here, the psychological framework clarifies. Attention is a resource, like vitamin D in December, precious and quickly depleted. Cognitive science names three levers at hand: appraisal, focus, and habit. Appraisal is the story told about events. Stoicism trains that story toward reality without catastrophizing. A terse email is not a threat. It is text awaiting interpretation. Focus is the discipline of keeping the mind on the chosen tool. The artisan uses implementation intentions that fit Nordic schedules. When the stand-up ends, the phone goes in a drawer for 50 minutes. Habit is the ritual scaffold. Swedish culture already supplies some: the sun walk at lunch, the fika that lowers shoulders, and the orderly close of the workday that makes room for fredagsmys and candlelight. Stoic practice dovetails with these, keeping them from becoming mere aesthetics. Ritual becomes technique. Marcus Aurelius spoke of returning to oneself as a spring of water that keeps flowing even when muddy footprints cross it. The metaphor reads differently in a land of frozen lakes. The inner spring must be maintained deliberately when the outer landscape is ice. Environmental psychology confirms what the elders intuited. Light, movement, and view lines alter mood and cognition. The tranquil artisan recognizes the workshop extends beyond the desk. Lamps are positioned to mimic dawn. Tasks requiring creativity are scheduled for the brightest window. Deep work rides the crest of the ultradian wave before coffee, not after lunch, when light retreats. None of this is aestheticism. It is lagom applied to neurons. Social pressure remains a quiet snowdrift against the door. Lagom encourages humility while perfectionism polishes every deliverable until vitality flees. Memento mori punctures that spell. The thought of finitude returns courage to ship the work that is good enough to serve and human enough to breathe. Negative visualization complements it by exposing the imagined catastrophe of imperfection as survivable. A presentation with one stumble, a report with one honest limitation. These do not end careers. They model sanity. The team learns by imitation, and culture shifts 2 degrees toward health, which is how cultures truly change. You can sense the difference as a day unfolds with these tools in hand. When the meeting veers, the artisan returns to appraisal. What is chosen and what is given. When the news stream delivers a market shiver, the artisan recalls mortality and chooses to invest time where life is found, in craft, in relationships, in slow winter dinners. When a plan derails, the rehearsal of obstacles makes adjustments swift, not dramatic. Over weeks, an identity settles in. Not the frantic high performer outrunning darkness, but the steady practitioner who makes a lamp of attention and walks calmly through the early night. The curiosity of this transformation is that it does not shout. It glows as softly as a window in Ulster sun at 4 in the afternoon. Colleagues notice meetings that end a few minutes early, yet accomplish more. Families notice presence at home that feels unhurried. Energy steadies. Anxiety speaks less often and more quietly. The polarities that once tore at spirit, ambition and balance, excellence and rest, begin to braid into a single rope. The season remains what it is. The workshop within changes temperature. In offices from Malmo to Kiruna, a seasonal craft takes shape, the way ice forms along the edges of a river, quietly, then all at once. Teams learn to lay out their weeks like a winter table set for both nourishment and restraint. The tranquil artisan arrives with a lamp that does not glare, a thermos that smells of cardamom, and a posture that signals arbetsro, the Swedish respect for focused work. The routine is built around a single honest admission. Daylight is currency. Those who budget it wisely move through Mörktid with clarity. Those who spend it carelessly become bankrupt by mid-afternoon. So the day's most cognitively demanding task is placed inside the brightest window, often between 10 and 2. The phone is laid to rest in a drawer, as if tucking a child for a nap. The calendar breathes, block, pause, block, breathe, like a skier's cadence over flat light. Your own practice can follow this winter arithmetic. Treat sunlight as a meeting with nature that cannot be rescheduled. If the sky opens, step outside for a brisk loop around the block, along the Joda Elve or across a courtyard glazed with frost. The body banks brightness. The mind thanks you with steadier attention. When clouds hold the day hostage, create your own architecture of glow. Warm bulbs at eye level, reflective surfaces that borrow light, screens dimmed to reduce glare. A simple ritual anchors the switch from chatter to craft. Perhaps the striking of a match to light a candle. Perhaps the opening of a window for 30 seconds of cold air that sets the nervous system to alert without anxiety. Work itself bends toward lagom. Meetings shrink to fit their purpose, like good wool. The team adopts a winter oath. Decisions are made where influence is real. Worries that belong to the weather are named and released. At the week's start, each person marks a personal boundary as clearly as a ski track. The school pickup, the late morning physiotherapy, the half hour of sun walk regardless of deadlines. Boundaries are not indulgences, they are infrastructure for reliability. The paradox becomes visible. When life is held with sanely firm lines, generosity increases. The artisan says little and keeps promises. Trust accumulates, like the snowpack that feeds spring rivers. Digital overwhelm is addressed with Nordic pragmatism. Notifications are herded into corrals, twice daily checks for email, a single afternoon window for chat. The inbox becomes a fjord, deep, cold, and visited with intention, not lived in. The evening email is allowed to wait like a winter seed beneath soil. No life is lost by sunrise. Colleagues learn the rhythm and mirror it. Slack channels are pruned the way apple trees are cut back for healthier fruit. Fika reclaims its original function, not a sugar rush, but a psychological reset, where small talk can include the naming of tensions before they harden into resentment. The social pressure to appear eternally prepared softens when a senior colleague allows a pause, admits a limitation, and chooses clarity over performance. The darker weeks invite memento mori into the workflow without gloom. A small token sits near the keyboard, a polished pebble from the Buhislan coast, a photograph of a grandparent who worked with hands in thinner light than this. When perfectionism begins to glare, the artifact reminds the artisan that time will not bow to vanity. Reports are shipped on time. Elegance is found in accuracy and kindness rather than in ornamental detail that seduces attention past usefulness. At project kickoffs, a brief negative visualization steals the group. Imagine supply delayed. Imagine a key colleague on leave. Imagine data arriving incomplete. This rehearsal is calm and swift, like checking avalanche gear before a backcountry tour. The team adjusts timelines with humility and proceeds with fewer illusions, which is another word for fewer future panics. Seasonal considerations extend beyond the office walls. Commutes become rituals of recalibration. On a dark November morning in Umeå, the bus cabin is a floating lantern. Headphones carry Nordic folk or silence rather than news that jolts. On the return trip through Södermalm, a deliberate phone fast gives the brain a corridor from work to home. So fredagsmys begins with presence rather than recovery. Sleep is guarded as a community asset. Screens dim 2 hours before bed, the bedroom becomes a chapel of darkness and cool air. Those who have access to basu use it not as bravado, but as nervous system hygiene, melting muscular complaint and giving melancholy less purchase. Cultural nuance matters. Jantelagin is honored for its social wisdom, yet held at a distance when it mutes necessary excellence. A designer in Lund shares credit generously and still names a bold solution when the moment requires it. A manager in Sundsvall declines meetings that smell of obligation without outcome, and no one mistakes it for arrogance. Integrity wears a wool sweater and looks people in the eye. The signal spreads. Enoughness is not laziness. It is craftsmanship across time. You are asked to test all of this in the small arena of a single day. Rise into the dimness with a slow lamp. Place the keystone task in the sunlit slice and defend it with quiet ferocity. Take the noon walk even if it rains. Let cold sting cheeks like a reminder that the body is a creature, not a courier for tasks. Name aloud one worry that is weather and let it pass. Close the laptop 5 minutes earlier than habit and notice how that sliver returns to you as warmth elsewhere. The experiment is humble and decisive. Over a month, it becomes character.
As the Baltic wind stripes the water outside Naka and snow begins to salt the steps of Gamla, the tranquil artisan carries routines like fire in a lantern, visible enough to guide, modest enough to travel well. Darkness does not become an enemy, it becomes an instruction manual.
By December, the country settles into a serious tenderness. Windows host paper stars, saffron buns scent early mornings. Lucia's procession pours a thin river of light through schools and hospitals. In workplaces, the choreography that began in September matures into a culture. The tranquil artisan is no longer an exception, but an attractor, drawing teams toward sane rhythm. Meetings carry the clean edges of snow crystals. Deliverables land like steady snowfall instead of avalanches. Lagom reveals itself not as lukewarm compromise, but as proportions that keep warmth amid scarcity. The archetype evolves again, from conscientious builder to tranquil artisan to winter mentor. The colleague who models composure without austerity, who treats daylight as sacred and attention as a commons. The transformation hinges on a quiet metaphysics. Work is no longer a theater for proving worth. It becomes a practice for shaping character. Marcus Aurelius would recognize the shift. He urged governance of impulse before governance of empire, and the Nordic office becomes a small principality of such governance. Schedules respect circadian truth. Ambitions are trimmed to fit vessels that must cross dark seas without capsizing. Seneca's counsel on time becomes visible in calendars that hold fewer, truer commitments. Epictetus's discipline breathes in the way disputes are handled. Appraisals revised before words are flung. Emotions treated as weather fronts, observed with interest rather than storms inhabited without choice. The winter mentor shows that emotional sobriety is not indifference. It is hospitality to reality. You can practice this hospitality the moment a day begins. Before screens reignite civilization, stand by a window and let the dark say what it says. Ask which tasks actually belong to this creature in this latitude on this date, and which belong to fantasies. Then choose. Choose the keystone task. Choose the hour it will live in. Choose what will be allowed to interrupt it. Choose what will be allowed to wait. When the interruption comes, and it will, choose again with the same quiet dignity, like a skier rebalancing after a patch of ice. The repetition writes temperament into muscle memory. The cultural pressures remain, soft and persuasive. Jantalagan still whispers against standing out. The cult of competence still coaxes overwork disguised as moderation. Memento mori dissolves both illusions. The finitude of days demands excellence that serves, not perfection that dazzles. Negative visualization keeps fear from dictating tempo. Imagine the project failing and the team surviving, wiser. Imagine the presentation wobbling and the relationship strengthening through honesty. The imagined loss loosens the grip of pride. The work grows cleaner. Colleagues breathe easier. A form of social courage takes root. The courage to keep promises to body and mind without apology. Environmental psychology, once a footnote, becomes applied ethics. Desks shift to borrow light. Corridors become walking paths for brief stand-ups. Shared kitchens evolve into small commons, where conflict is metabolized with coffee rather than deferred until it hardens. Arbitrary is defended by not severity, but by design. Slack norms align with winter physiology. Expectations shrink after sunset.
Companies that once chased productivity for its own sake begin to prize steadiness, discovering that reliability in Mörktid compounds into creativity when spring arrives. A workplace becomes its own microclimate, predictable, humane, bright enough for trust to photosynthesize. The narrative extends into homes where candles meet homework, where a pot simmers while boots dry by the door. Children see adults end work on time and learn that a day has edges. Partners watch phones sleep in drawers and feel the difference between presence and proximity. The winter mentor's life communicates a truth no policy can enforce. Boundaries are not walls, they are bridges that carry energy from one shore to another without spillage. When February finally deepens its blue hour, morale holds. The lamps remain small, the nights still long, yet spirits do not fray into cynicism. The season is joined, not fought. You are invited to render this philosophy practical in a sentence whispered before sleep. Control choices. Accept seasons. Serve something larger. In the morning, answer with 3 gestures. Place light where work needs it, not where anxiety demands it. Name one fear and rehearse its arrival until it loses spectacle. And when fatigue tugs, trade 5 minutes of scrolling for 5 minutes of stillness beside a window, letting the cloudscape advise the nervous system. These gestures are ordinary and quietly radical. Over weeks, the person who does them becomes a climate others lean toward. The archipelago will thaw. The sun will climb the stair of the sky and stay for coffee. But this is the paradox northern lives understand. The habits forged under scarcity are the ones that make abundance meaningful. When April light floods in, those who practice wintercraft will not sprint mindlessly into brightness. They will carry the same lagom of attention, the same stoic keel into projects that widen, journeys that lengthen, dreams that finally dare size. Seasons turn, but character persists. And character is the true architecture of a life. The procession passes, the office quiets, and a city of windows glow like constellations on earth. Somewhere, a tram hums through ice-laced streets, and in its cabin sit people who have learned to govern the one republic that never falls with empires, the republic of their own choices. In the North, this is not a slogan, but a practice performed daily with coffee and courage, with lamps and limits, with calm that does not brag. The mind that embraces winter finds spring within.